15 November 1978, East Berlin. I write one line, I cannot say aloud. I pronounce sentences in the name of the people. In 1992, the people ask why I never learned their name. 8 May 1945, Berlin. Prenzlauer Berg. A boy named Karl scratches at plaster dust on a windowsill and listens for a father who does not return. His mother ties a scarf and joins the line of women carrying bricks from a cratered street to a heap that will be a wall again. Tremorfrauen become a noun and a rhythm. Pick, stack, wipe, breathe. The rubble is not scenery. It is a rationing system for hope. Allied reconnaissance photographs file the city into grids. Soviet occupation reports call it Ordnung in der Unordnung, order in disorder. The arithmetic of 1945 is physical. How many calories a day? How many hours a curfew? How many minutes to cross an open intersection under a soldier's eye? Red Army patrols write times on tickets. 21,000 curfew. Neighbors whisper about retribution. A note appears on a doorframe. Nicht plundern. Children inside. In a notebook preserved in Bundesarchiv, a sanitation engineer lists the dead he collected from a single block: 2 elderly, 1 unknown male, 2 children. No adjectives. The arithmetic of dead remains unadorned. The diary of a nurse at Charité says, "We are rebuilding bones while the city rebuilds itself." Hunger is not a metaphor. 1946 is the hunger winter. Ration cards list fats and flours like weapons count in an army. Grams replace satisfied meals. In US military government reports for Berlin, cigarettes appear as a unit of value. 10 for a blouse. 4 for a loaf if you know the right doorway. In the Soviet zone, an HO shop opens with rarities in a glass case. A woman pawns a wedding ring. A soldier laughs. She does not. Karl's mother, Erika, writes to a cousin in Magdeburg in November 1945, "We have 3 rooms, but only one has glass. We sleep together in it. I walk to Alexanderplatz to trade my father's suit for 2 tins of fish that taste like oil. Please send potatoes." Every word is precise because precision matters. Occupation censors read, interception logs file morale indicators as if they were tonnage. The black market becomes a nervous system. Allied intelligence summaries note that cigarettes are currency in the West, vodka and barter in the East, and that women's bodies, like blankets, move under a price. A statistician at the Office of Military Government for Germany writes a memo. The average caloric intake in summer 1946 in urban centers is 1,200 kcal. The mathematics of bread is simple and brutal. You can count survival in calories. Denazification arrives as paper. Fragebogen arrive by the millions. 31 questions, then a signature. The form is a mirror most people tilt to catch the best light. West of the Elbe, Spruchkammern classify guilt. Categories are invented: Hauptschuldige, major offenders; Belastit offenders, Belastit, lesser offenders; Mitlaufer followers, Entlastit, exonerated. The numbers flow like an industrial process. 12 million questionnaires. Fewer than 1% major offenders. The mathematics of guilt evolves into a pyramid with a wide base labeled Mitlaufer. In the Soviet zone, denazification is also dismantling. Factories are dismantled and shipped east. SMAD Order 24 demands the removal of Nazis from government posts, land seized from Junkers and redistributed to Bauern. Kadarakten personnel files are opened, annotated, closed, and opened again. A teacher, a party member since 1937, writes, "I taught arithmetic and poems. I did not teach hatred." He is removed in June and reinstated in November. There are too many students and not enough qualified teachers. The system needs stability more than purity. The arithmetic of schools dictates mercy. Karl's father, a clerk at a small publishing firm, is missing. His denazification file, if it exists, contains no confession. A Red Cross tracing request returns with "ohne Ergebnis," no result. Absence becomes a status. It makes Karl a Zonenflüchtling in waiting, except he stays. The Soviet officers ask Erika about the husband. She says, "We have not seen him since February." They write it down. Bureaucratic sorrow takes ink well. 1947. Displaced persons occupy a barracks on the edge of a devastated town near Fürstenwalde. The sign on the fence, UNRWA Center number 231. Survivors build a life with the tools at hand. They write letters to relatives who do not answer. A Jewish survivor from Oder, noted in a report by the Joint Distribution Committee, says, "We are a city beside a city that pretends not to see." Germans walk past the fence. They look straight ahead. Narratives diverge. Germans talk about bombings. DPs talk about death camps. They are both true voices, but one crowds the other in the market of memory. In oral histories recorded decades later, some Berliners insist they did not know. The Städtische Museum receipts say otherwise. Pots and linens stamped with names return from houses to DP camp inventories after inquiries by British officers. The arithmetic of stolen goods is ledger-friendly. The temperaments are not. "I borrowed it," one woman tells a British investigator. "I always meant to return it." The investigator writes, "She cried. I did not think she lied. But she did not tell the truth either." Trains bring millions of expellees west. 12 million Germans expelled from East Prussia, Pomerania, Silesia, the Sudetenland between 1945 and 1949. They arrive with sacks, with paper bundles tied with twine, with photographs that will warp in the damp. A town in Lower Saxony produces a sheet that reads, "Verteilung der Flüchtling auf die Gemeinden." Distribution. 100 to this parish, 400 to the next. The mathematics of shelter is performed with chalk on slate, a family forced into a single room with another family. 2 stoves, 2 clocks, 1 table. Bedtimes negotiated like treaties. In the east, the flow is different. Expellees land in Mecklenburg and Brandenburg, rebuild on land redistributed from expropriated estates. The angry body becomes a political force. The Silesian dialect floats amid the Spreewald reeds. A woman named Clara from near Opoli tells a Volkskammer delegate in 1948, "We picked up potatoes from the fields the Russians missed. We picked up our lives the same way." The deputy writes it down. It becomes a sentence in a speech. It becomes policy. It becomes policy. It becomes a myth. Karl grows tall. He is 15 in the winter of 1947. He remembers fingers cracked and bleeding from turning bricks. He remembers a chapel with a roof cut open to the sky where candles burn under rain. He remembers stealing a handful of coal from a railway siding and the fear that expanded his chest when a uniform stepped out of the shadow. He ran. The soldier did not follow. The soldier had other arithmetic to do. 1948. Currency reform in the West. New notes Deutsche Mark out of uniforms like conjurers' scarves. The East answers with an Ostmark. The day after the reform, shop windows sparkle on the western side. In the East, hoarding continues. Soviet reports on morale note significant envy across the sectors. The blockade descends. The airlift begins. Karl watches planes from Tempelhof arc across grey skies like predictable birds. He can time them with his heartbeats. In East Berlin, new posters cover old bullet scars. Anti-fascismus becomes the state's first law. Nazis are said to have been a class phenomenon. The victims are said to have been workers. The class culprit is capitalism. The naming reduces the mess to a manageable rule. People begin to learn it by heart. Some believe it, some find it useful. The arithmetic of ideology is taught like multiplication tables. Children recite, The system recites back to them, 1950. A tribunal in the West tries a former camp guard. The newspaper story is 3 paragraphs long and buried below advertisements for bicycles. 1951. A Spushkammer in Württemberg downgrades a Belasteter to Mitläufer. No further action. The need for trained administrators is a quiet argument. It wins. In East Germany, the new justice is cleaner. Former Nazis are pushed aside, replaced by anti-fascist jurists trained in short, intense courses. Party loyalty can be a credential. Cataracten record thoughts like crimes. Karl sits in a classroom at Humboldt University as a lecturer explains socialist legality. The sentences are 1 part law and 1 part catechism. Legal positivism is replaced with revolutionary necessity. The Cold War rearranges logic. Justice is what advances socialism, a pamphlet says. Justice is what keeps the peace, another says, south of the Elbe. The arithmetic of this is simple. 2 solutions, 1 equation, legitimacy. Both fight through the courts. 1953, June. Workers march on the Stalin Alley. They demand lower norms, higher wages, less emphasis on slogans, more on lunch. The Soviet tanks come. The noise is metallic and final. Karl is 21 and watches from a doorway. He does not write about it until decades later. His silence is part of his survival arithmetic. The authorities file it differently. BSDU records list an informant in Karl's seminar group. The report says, KM shows good discipline. He does not talk. It is counted as a virtue. It is also counted. The economic transition divides a country in 2. In the West, Marshall Plan shipments unload on docks, then on assembly lines. Reports detail gears, grain, and dried milk. In the East, reparation trains leave with machine tools and turbines. New VEBs arise from old names. Rationing ends in the West in 1950, later in the East. The first televisions glow in pay windows. Children press faces to glass. The miracle is it is a production function. It is wage restraint and investment and imported coal. It is also forgetting, arranged and spontaneous. School books in Bavaria in 1955 devote 3 pages to National Socialism, 2 to Allied bombing, 1 to expellees. In Saxony, a textbook devotes 6 pages to anti-fascist resistance, 1 to the crimes of fascism against the Jews, and 3 to the suffering inflicted on the German people by the fascists and their imperialist allies. The arithmetic of memory is a syllabus. It tells students how to solve for X. X is their place in the story. Karl finishes law school. He takes an oath. He passes a quiet test. His file shows no family abroad, no church attendance, no doubts recorded by any superior. He becomes a judge at a Bezirksgericht in East Berlin in 1962. His robes are wool, heavy and serious. He likes the weight. It makes him feel anchored in a world that still moves under him. A case arrives in 1968. A man distributes pamphlets against the invasion of Czechoslovakia. The file is labeled Staatsverbrechen, state crime. The Stasi file includes a memo. The accused spoke of an other socialism. Karl reads. He feels a flicker. He writes a sentence in the margin. What is the people, legally? He underlines it and closes the file. He returns to it. He crosses out the note. He writes his judgment. Im Namen des Volkes. He gives the man 2 years. He goes home and eats soup and sleeps well. He has learned to move on schedule. Between 1949 and 1989, the East German judiciary becomes a lever. The law becomes the long arm of a short doctrine. Trials for Republikflucht multiply. The arithmetic of the border produces cases. In one quarterly report from the Ministry of Justice in 1974, 781 people are convicted for attempted escape or aiding escape. The judgments speak a language of protection. They refer to collective goods, to class enemies, to vigilance. The files are stamped with dates and names and the word vollstreckt, executed, not capital sentences, merely sentences served. On the Western side, other arithmetic operates. Economic growth smooths moral rough edges. By the late 1950s, the Mittelwerfer are back in schools, ministries, and boardrooms. The Bundesarchiv holds personnel files with penciled notes, Tätig 1933-1945, ohne Beanstandung. Active not. The categories did their work. There were not enough hands to build a new world and hold a perfect memory of the old one. In 1961, Hans Globke, co-drafter of the Nuremberg Laws, advises Chancellor Adenauer. In 1968, student protesters shout numbers at the men in suits. They invert a mathematics learned at home. Contact with victims never becomes easy. German towns exist beside DP camps through 1949. Then the camps empty slowly as people leave for Israel, for the United States, for Canada. Those who stay become neighbors who are not seen. A store on a street in Munich sells photographs taken by a man from EOD. They are of weddings in barracks, of children born where their parents expected to die. German customers look, say schön, and move on to buy coffee. The separation persists. In 1976, a poet named after the mess of post-war births is charged with subverting the state. He read forbidden lines in an illegal circle. Karl receives the file. He reads notes, whispers transcribed from the mouths of friends. He reads a tactical proposal from the Stasi saying that a light sentence will be more useful than a heavy one. The mathematics of fear often sums to a more durable silence when the numbers are small. He gives the poet 8 months suspended. The poet leaves for the West in 1977. He writes essays. He uses Karl as an unnamed example. Karl does not read them. He hears about them in a briefing, the way one hears about weather in another country. 1978. He writes the line he cannot say. He writes it after a case where a seamstress is accused of stealing thread and explaining to friends that the state steals the thread from us first. He cannot shake her face from his mind. He writes, I pronounce sentences in the name of the people. In 1992, the people ask why I never learned their name. He underlines the date. He hides the page in a file labeled Civil Codes, 1956 to 1964. He trusts that no one will look there. It is an old habit, finding safety in dust. In the West, in the 1970s, trials of Nazi crimes resume. The Auschwitz trials in Frankfurt bring former SS men to the dock. The country watches with half-lidded eyes. Some weep, some yawn. The arithmetic of accountability is belated. It collides with retirement parties. In the East, the anti-fascist story is still clear and still simple. The official line says, we have nothing to do with it. The unofficial line says, we have much to do with each other. Karl's children learn a neat version of their father's youth. Their textbooks show Trümmerfrauen smiling. They show Red Army soldiers raising a flag. They do not show the man who enters an apartment and takes the last tin of herring. They do not show the hunger in quiet corridors. Karl does not show those things either. He tells his children numbers. He says, we received 900 grams of bread a week. In February, 700. He says, we were 5 people in one room during the coldest winter. He says, when the currency changed, a whole store was bright. He does not say what he thought when the tanks rolled in 1953. He does not say where he looks when he signs a sentence. He looks at the table. He looks at his hand. He signs. 1989, October. Leipzig, Dresden, Berlin. The street arithmetic changes. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. People say, "Wir sind das Volk, we are the people." Then they say, "Wir sind ein Volk, we are one people." The word Volk, the people. The word Volk, the people, leaves the judgment formula and moves into the cold air where breath makes it visible. Karl walks past the protests. He does not join. He is in his 50s and has built a life that holds even when pushed. In November, the wall opens. He watches people climb. He hears a shout on the radio that sounds like laughter through tears. He closes his eyes. 1990. The robe goes into a closet. The new judiciary arrives. Files open. The Stasi records become paper ghosts, thousands of kilometers of shelves. Photographs of judges with party badges are blown up and hung in newspapers. The term Belastung returns with new meaning. There is a process again. It resembles denazification and also does not. The Spruchkammer categories drift in memory like old furniture repurposed in a new apartment. There are hearings. There are questions. The mathematics of guilt recalculates across a divide 30 years wide. Karl receives a letter. He is to appear before a committee in 1992. The letter is precise. It lists the cases. It lists the dates. It has a tone that reminds him of the letters his mother received in 1946. The bureaucratic voice always outlives the banners. He walks to the hearing with the heavy feeling of repetition. He sits. A woman asks him why he never learned the names of the people in whose name he sentenced. He answers in sentences that are neat and true and not sufficient. He says, "The law required me to say it. It was my office." She says, "Who are the people?" He says, "The socialist working class." It sounds wrong as he says it. It sounds like it belongs to a museum exhibit designed by a careful curator. His cases are read aloud like verses. 1968, pamphlets. 1972, Republikflug. 1976, verses and Vopo reports. He recognizes the names. Some are alive. One sits in the room. He avoids his eyes. When it is over, he walks home past a supermarket filled with fruit he cannot name. He enters his apartment and opens the old grey file. He finds the page from 1978. He reads his own prediction like a diagnosis he had known he would receive. He writes another note beneath it. "The people did not ask me. They told me." The long history around him does not justify him. It does not damn him entirely. It holds him. It speaks through numbers and files and verbs in the passive voice. He is not a villain for whom one violin rises in a soundtrack. He is a functionary with a memory that finally moves. He begins to read. He reads West German reports from the 1950s, when men like his father's boss returned to their desks. He reads East German factory bulletins from 1952, where former Nazis were listed as having been re-educated and assigned to production brigades. He sees variation and repetition. He remembers the first time he held a ration card. He remembers a day in 1945 when his mother traded a set of cufflinks for a box of American cigarettes and then traded those cigarettes for butter, which she traded again for fabric to make a dress that she sold to buy a winter coat for him. The mathematics of survival was never a class. It was the life of every day. He wonders whether his days as a judge had simply been another kind of trading. He had cut guilt into manageable portions so the system could eat without choking. He is called to testify again, this time in a criminal case against a former Stasi officer. He is a witness for the prosecution. He is asked about legality. He answers like a man who knows that words can be both truth and tools. He says, "We had law. We did not have justice." He stops. He thinks. He corrects. "We had a kind of justice." He adds, almost whispering, "It was our kind." The prosecutor writes this down. The courtroom rustles. A journalist underlines the phrase. It appears in a newspaper the next day as evidence and as a headline. The mathematics of words multiplies an error into a clue. Friends from his youth stop speaking to him. One writes him a postcard. It says, "You decided. We lived with your decisions." He keeps it in a book of poetry he had never read when he had the chance. He learns the poet's name now, and he learns the names he had refused himself when he signed. He thinks about rulers and rulers' bread, about how the mouth decides what to taste. He thinks about his father who never returned. Was he a Mitläufer, an Entlasteter, a name without a file? Memory always moves toward fiction when it lacks paper. Karl visits a museum in Berlin dedicated to the victims of state persecution in the GDR. He looks at his robe behind glass. It is not his actual robe, it is a robe like his robe. The exhibit labels speak about terror in a confident font. He flinches. He wants a smaller adjective. He also wants a larger one. Coaching words to match lives is still his instinct. He reads a panel about trials for treason that are now described as farce. He reads names he signed beneath. He leaves. On the steps, he sees two students laughing. He feels an old anger, as if they were joking at a funeral. He corrects himself. It is a museum. It is also a school. He writes in a notebook, as his mother once did. He begins with dates: 1945, 1945, 1953, 1961, 1968, 1978, 1989. Writes the mathematics, 1992. He writes short sentences. He expands them when his hand allows. He includes notes about rationing, about curfews, about lessons. He puts numbers next to them. He tries to calculate a sum that cannot exist. He writes, "The arithmetic of guilt cannot be done on paper. It is in the lives that continue." He writes, The mathematics of law taught me order. I confused the two and called it peace." His notebook joins a regional oral history project after he dies. The archivist files it under M. Karl B. 1932, Berlin. Researchers pull it and quote him in footnotes. His words live where he always lived, between public and private, between authority and doubt, between stories and structures. A young graduate student drafts a chapter on denazification. She includes a section on transitional justice in the GDR. She writes about continuity and change. She writes about mitigation as complicity. She quotes Karl's line from 1978 as a hinge. She recognizes the voice of a man trying to turn a thought into a verdict and failing. Outside the archive, a city continues the work of remembering what it chooses to recall. Stolperstein appear on sidewalks. Faces look up from brass. School classes visit camps. Tourists pose at the remains of a wall. People argue about streets named after old men. New names replace them. The arithmetic of symbols is busy and ambitious. It does not reach every kitchen table. It does not reach every bed at 3 in the morning. Karl's ghosts did their work at that hour. A woman who had testified against him in 1992 writes an essay. She writes that she does not forgive him and that she does not need to. She writes that he was a line in a sequence of lines that caught her. She writes that the lines are thinner now, but they are not gone. She writes, he is an example of a system doing what a system does. She leaves a sentence empty afterward. She leaves a sentence empty afterward. She lets the reader fill it with either acceptance or hatred. In the end, the story is not his alone. It is the story of a country that made two countries, then unmade them, and had to find a language that could hold all the arithmetic it had learned along the way. It is the story of women who lifted bricks so their sons could become judges. It is the story of the men those sons sentenced. It is the story of a state that declared itself innocent of one crime so it could better commit another kind called silence. Karl's last entry is dated 3 March 1993. He writes, "I have testimonies, I have receipts, I have my signature on them all." He writes about a morning in 1946 when his mother boiled potato peels and called it soup. He writes about a night in 1976 when he signed a suspended sentence and called it mercy. He writes about a day in 1992 when a woman looked at him without hatred, and he did not know what to call it. He returns to his 1978 line. He adds, "In 1992, when they asked my name, I did not say it." He folds the page. He had never learned the people's name because he had survived by speaking as if names were dangerous material. In 1945, they were. In 1978, they were. In 1992, they were invitations. The front line after 1945 never ran across a battlefield for Carl. It ran through his memory and his paperwork, and it cut as neatly as a judge's pen.